And the reason this has been possible is because we're doing something that's quite unique in that we are creating something that is to really help people living with a chronic condition, which is diabetes. But we're aiming to create something which has a much more consumer facing approach and is something that isn't necessarily what you have to use to manage your condition, but it's something that you would choose to use because not only do you benefit from the product itself, but you actively want to use the features. You want to get the benefits from that.
Welcome to Be Well. Today's guest is Sam Scott. He's an exercise physiologist and CEO of Enhanced. You will have to maybe explain how you actually pronunciate Enhanced exactly, but Enhanced D, a digital platform that helps people with diabetes exercise more safely and confidently. Sam, you previously led research at Team Novo Nordisk, the world's first all-diabetes pro cycling team. And you have also a strong background in research related to the field of exercise and diabetes. So you'll be able to, introduce us and give us a lot more background about that. And maybe a couple of words about Enhance. It brings CGM, workout, sleep, and nutrition data into one place and adds intelligence on top and even lets you share the data with clinicians and more. So you can train with, let's say, without the guesswork. So Sam, it's great having you here today and letting you also give us some more background about Enhance, what you guys actually do. And before we talk about Enhance, maybe it would be great to also give you the opportunity to introduce yourself quickly to the audience.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I mean, the introduction said quite a lot already. So originally I'm from the UK, did a PhD there. That's where my real sort of passionate for exercise and type 1 diabetes has come together from working with so many people who live with the condition. I don't have type 1 diabetes myself, but this provided me really with this window into how difficult and challenging it can be. We were doing clinical studies aimed at helping people to do sort of normal levels of exercise, by which I mean sort of 20 minutes, 30 minutes of cycling, regular sort of gym sessions. And this experience taught me how difficult this condition is to live with. Every single day is all of these extra decisions, etc. And this really motivated me to leave the UK, go and focus on solving this problem. The experience that you highlighted there with Team Novo Nordisk, the athletes, etc., that experience was born out of my curiosity to find out how athletes on the other end of the spectrum are able to manage glucose levels alongside performance. And then after a few years of doing these different things, I ended up in Switzerland. I was leading a clinical lab in Bern. The research focus there was sort of nutrition, diabetes tech, behavioral focus on how we help people exercise safely, how we remove the barriers to exercise. And in conjunction, I was working with this professional cycling team. So I was in such a privileged situation to see on both sides how we develop the means to help people in the clinical setting, from sort of the clinical research all the way into the development of consensus papers, the way that those bits of information are put into the hands of doctors, and then on the professional athlete side. And these experiences, I still always had this feeling that there was something missing and that we were living in a situation where there was a big opportunity to help a lot more people by creating this digital platform that was able to scale and it was able to take advantage of glucose monitoring that so many people with diabetes already have access to. That's why I co-founded Enhanced. And as you say, it's designed to guide people through exercise. It uses AI and takes your data to specifically highlight challenges, to build training plans that adapt in real time based on what your fitness level is and what your glucose is doing. And we're at the stage now where we're looking to just grow the user base and improve the features on offer.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. I think we'll talk a lot more about Enhance, what you guys actually do later on the podcast. Maybe one more, let's say, introductional question. I'll be wondering also personally how that shaped you to work with these athletes actually at this point in your career. I mean, oftentimes you hear that athletes, they really make sure that they have a setup that fits them to really be able to perform at their best possible in the best possible way. What has it taught you to work with these athletes? I mean, this time, is there anything that sort of has shaped your view on building your business nowadays?
I've worked with quite a lot of athletes across a variety of different sports, not just cycling, also running, game sports as well, where it's a lot more unpredictable in the sense that you have the opposition to contend with, not just your glucose level. So it varies from sport to sport. But the overwhelming sort of experience that I've gathered in terms of speaking to athletes, the vast majority of the work has been done on the side of the athlete themselves. By which I mean that usually from just to sort of provide a basic scenario, the athlete may have done sport in the past. They may have been interested in something. They are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. All of a sudden, they have these additional things to contend with in terms of insulin dosing, nutrition. Will I be able to continue with my sport? Will I not? And oftentimes, doctors are lacking the resources to be able to really help patients. They're lacking time to be able to provide the amount of personalized support that's kind of required. So the individual has to find those solutions within themselves. They have to be really meticulous in terms of how they stay on top of their glucose management while managing to still compete at the same level. Within professional sports, there's no forgiveness in that sense. It's only the best athletes who reach a certain point. So nobody's going to give you an extra try just because you have diabetes. It's all about how you manage to do that alongside. So there's a huge amount of personal sort of respect I have for these individuals who are able to manage this, incorporate it within their lifestyle, and incorporate the way in which they fit training in, they fit the different logistical challenges of being a professional athlete to still compete at that level. So I think it highlights as well that it is possible, but it could be easier if there was more support, especially moving from sort of amateur level all the way to professional.
Great. Maybe before we do a little bit of a deep dive into Enhance and also your founding story and etc., let's maybe talk a bit more about, let's say, what is diabetes? So we pick up everybody. So this is the podcast of the business of health and wellness, I call it. So usually people maybe in the audience, or maybe just like me, we're not, medical experts, but we're very, very much interested in this field. And maybe for listeners who are new to the topic, I mean, people are aware of diabetes, you hear it a lot, but could you maybe introduce us into what diabetes is again, very briefly, and also explain to us why it can be actually trickier to do exercise when you sort of have this condition of diabetes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really important because there can be certain misconceptions, especially with diabetes. So diabetes is an umbrella term for a number of different conditions. It broadly speaking means that you are unable to metabolize carbohydrates appropriately. And diabetes is split into different types. So the most common types are type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and then you also have gestational diabetes. This is sort of a shorter term diabetes that women experience during pregnancy, but focusing on type 1 and type 2 because these are the major focus and these are the most common. So type 1 diabetes, this affects around 9 million people worldwide. I think is your audience mainly in Switzerland or are you more broad? In Switzerland, there's around 30,000 people living with type 1 diabetes. With this condition, it's a chronic autoimmune condition. So for some reason that we don't currently know, your body's immune system starts attacking the cells in the pancreas, these beta cells. And these beta cells are responsible for producing the hormone insulin. This hormone, under normal situations, is responsible for lowering glucose levels so that it can be metabolized after you have a meal. So what should happen in normal situations is you eat a meal, your body detects that and signals to release insulin from the pancreas. And then this hormone insulin travels to receptors which are on the muscle or fat cells, various parts of the body, and tells the transporter molecules to take glucose into the muscle so that glucose is not high. And after a diagnosis with type 1 diabetes, this means for the rest of your life, you are reliant on monitoring your glucose levels to then make decisions on how you administer insulin, this hormone, through means such as injections, or you'd use a device called an insulin pump in order to self-manage and self-regulate your glucose. So you're no longer relying on the body's system. And to give you an indication of how difficult this is for somebody, your body, if you imagine a 70-kilo male, like a sort of average sized man, within the bloodstream, your blood contains 5 grams of glucose. So this is around the same amount of glucose that is in a tablespoon. So if you have a tablespoon, you imagine the amount of sugar there. That's the total amount of sugar that you're aiming to maintain within your circulation. And you don't want this to reduce because this glucose is essential for supplying energy to the brain. If it goes too low, your brain no longer receives that. And this is why you would experience very dramatic symptoms associated with low blood sugar. But on the other hand, you don't want it to go higher than this, especially not over longer term, because this leads to longer term complications because the high levels of sugar, it actually damages cells within the body. So this is type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, this is a chronic condition. It's associated more with lifestyle. There are very strong genetic components included in this. It tends to happen over a longer period where your body stops responding so well to the carbohydrates. So your body starts overcompensating. You have too much glucose in the body. Your body starts producing insulin to compensate for this. Eventually, those beta cells become tired, so to speak, and then you're unable to keep releasing the insulin to cope with those carbohydrates. As I say, it tends to happen sort of over longer term. So you would develop what's called pre-diabetes, and then you would develop type 2 diabetes with the diagnosis, eventually leading to the case where you'd need to administer insulin as well and have the blood glucose management. So these are the two most common. And type 2 diabetes currently worldwide is around 580 million people living with the condition. And then there's around another 500 million people with pre-diabetes. So you think about 1 billion people in total affected by this condition. And in Switzerland, the numbers are around 400,000 in this country alone.
Great. And thanks for the great introduction, by the way, and introducing us and teaching us about this topic. And what makes it so difficult for, let's say, people who have this condition to, let's say, do exercises and sports? What's sort of the challenging aspect in this with this condition?
Yeah, so let's focus on type 1 diabetes because type 1 diabetes is the main focus of where I am really interested. So first of all, in terms of regular barriers to exercise, people with type 1 diabetes have very similar barriers to everybody experiencing in terms of a lack of time, a lack of resources, travel, the money to be able to travel to do sports. Maybe they lack a community, etc. So these are barriers that tend to be experienced by everyone. But in addition, it's the complexity of managing your blood glucose and then also the fear of hypoglycemia. So the reason for this is, I mentioned before that you have this hormone that is no longer produced if you live with type 1 diabetes, and you need to administer this exogenously. And this hormone insulin is responsible for lowering blood glucose levels, for managing that. In addition to insulin having this action on these receptors to bring in glucose, muscle contractions also similarly cause a reduction in blood glucose levels. So when you start exercising muscle contractions, there are specific pathways which are triggered within the muscles that cause glucose receptors to move to the cell membrane of the muscle and cause an uptake in glucose. And under normal situations, the body is really good at balancing this because you have a balance between the glucose that's coming in through what you eat, and also the liver releases glucose in order to manage this. So all of the time in healthy individual without type 1 diabetes, your body is amazing at keeping this single teaspoon of sugar amount pretty stable within the glucose there. But with type 1 diabetes, what happens is you have different complexities which depend on the type of exercise you do, such as the intensity, and also whether you've had insulin recently. So let's start off with a low intensity, moderate intensity bout of exercise, such as cycling. When you start cycling, what's going to happen is these receptors are triggered through the contraction pathways, and it's going to cause glucose to enter the muscle. Glucose is going to steadily go down. Let's add into that scenario that you ate a meal 10 minutes before you do your cycle ride. You cover this with some insulin. What happens in that scenario is that the muscle contractions add to the insulin which is in the body and cause glucose to decline much more rapidly. So this is a couple of scenarios which would already be quite complex, but it's not that simple. I mean, I'm oversimplifying everything, just to be clear, but just to add in some other kind of complexities here. If you do exercise of a higher intensity, in general, what happens are there are additional hormones which are triggered, such as adrenaline or adrenaline. These act on the liver to release more glucose into the bloodstream. So when you do this form of exercise, your glucose doesn't drop, your glucose actually rises. And if you do exercise such as sprinting, high intensity weightlifting, for example, although you have muscle contractions going on, the trigger from these hormones, these catecholamines they're called, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cause your glucose to spike. And I could go on, but like there's so many complexities that are added into this, taking into account things such as competitive sports. So let's say, for example, one day we're training and then another day we do a competitive bout of exercise. And we see that speaking to a lot of athletes, depends on the importance of an event. During training, they have a system that really works. They're able to maintain very balanced blood glucose levels. But then when they're at the start of the race, they're sitting there, the adrenaline is pumping, their glucose is going through the roof, and they're left in this situation of, how do I fuel? Do I take insulin to lower the glucose at this point? But what happens as soon as I start the bout of exercise and then we get those contractions, the adrenaline goes sort of down at that point. So there are so many situations to account for. I'm particularly interested as well in the whole picture of an athlete. So how you would fuel in anticipation for different events, how you would recover afterwards, how you would manage your glucose post-exercise. So yeah, I think a lot of different factors.
Yeah, certainly complex, but I think you managed to illustrate it quite well, to illustrate the challenges that are sort of, involved in having type 1 diabetes for, let's say, athletes or people who are engaging in exercise. Very, very interesting. Let's move on. And I mean, from this, let's say, problem identification, how did you decide to, launch Enhanced? How did that story come about? What, let's say, gap in the market did you guys identify? And maybe what is your core product offering at Enhanced to solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the reason, so my team and I, we recognized that there was first of all, there was a real problem. Speaking to both people living with diabetes and clinicians, there was a huge problem in terms of the amount of data and the amount of decisions to manage around exercise. The next thing that we recognized was that so many people nowadays have access to wearable technology and also specific diabetes technologies, which are providing a lot of means to measure things. They're just creating a lot of data. And there's this push at the moment towards a convergence of wellness with sports devices and management of chronic conditions. But nobody was putting these factors together in terms of, can we actually leverage these technologies that so many people are accessing already, but simplify the output, make it actionable for both the healthcare professionals that want to assist those they're working with who have diabetes, and then also the people with diabetes themselves, and looking at different offerings across different spaces that had been so successful, but were not fulfilling the needs here. So if you take one example is Strava. So Strava is a fantastic example that demonstrates that people want to connect through exercise, through a digital product whereby they can connect either virtually, they can compare what they're doing, and they can sort of test themselves against what's going on. In the space that we're in, we recognize that one of the key elements of living with type 1 diabetes is this overwhelming sense of feeling alone, that you feel as though you're lacking support. You really want to identify with other people who can help you. There are so many bits of knowledge which are contained within the heads of those living with type 1 diabetes. And we thought, if we can find a way to help people connect through sports, similarly to how Strava grew, then we could do that. And we were looking at examples of how Strava and the story did that. So their first early adopter, they called them mammals. It was male athlete, was it middle-aged male athletes in Lycra? I think something like that, mammal. And what they did here was they took a technology which was the power meter and started with this very early adopter, and were able to expand from there, making the offer grow bigger and bigger. And we saw as well, if we could identify with those who are active with type 1 diabetes, use these social elements, then we could grow out using that. And there was different components that we wanted to build on as well. The fact that the data was all able to come together, and that we could build agents that are able to do jobs on behalf of the user. So identify problems, identify historical scenarios using your data, how you manage that in that situation to help people be the burden be reduced in that sense. Yeah.
So is it fair to say that you guys are sort of envisioning to build the Strava for type 1 diabetes athletes in a sense? Because maybe to give you some background for my question, I talked recently, I'm not sure if you saw that podcast with the Hybrid founders, and they're building sort of an integrator, because that's or is Strava for hybrid athletes actually. And their rationale behind it is that if you use Strava, it's more for, let's say, conditioning exercises. But if you have also, let's say, strength goals, you also find a way to maybe, let's say, track your goals. But if you have goals to be hybrid athletes, and most of athletes are hybrid in the sense of rugby players, rowers, they're all hybrid. You need to generate or create a new score to sort of track your progress. So they're building, in a sense, a Strava for hybrid athletes. That's their goal. I'll send it to you later. I'll also do it off script. If it doesn't fit into the podcast, I'll just cut it out. But are you guys, in a sense, maybe, Strava for type 1 diabetes, or is that not how you would position yourself?
I think that there's elements that have been proven to work very well on the growth side. And as I say, we can take advantage of the community elements that exist, the fact that we can make glucose monitoring interesting and shareable and assist people to help each other and identify challenges around their glucose management. But I think what we're doing is so much more than that. We're creating this central hub for your own data that you can self-manage. You can opt out of the social elements if you want. Many people don't want to share their data. There's different privacy levels that we've put on what is there. So we want to create something that's really solving various challenges that are present within type 1 diabetes. So first of all, the data overload. What do I do with my data? Secondly, the guidance, how do I exercise and how do I stay motivated? And then third, with the social elements of if I want to connect with people, if I want to find a community, that's something that I can engage with as well.
Could you maybe walk us through then, let's say, a typical customer journey? I mean, you guys, I think, have an application, right? Or how does it work? I mean, how is sort of the enhanced, or how does the enhanced experience look like from, let's say, a customer or someone interested in joining you guys?
Yeah, so we have started off really trying to focus on helping those living with type 1 diabetes. We have two products at the moment. One is our patient facing app, and the other one is a clinical dashboard. This dashboard is designed to go into endocrinology clinics. The point being is that diabetes management is 99% done by the individual at home, but we want it so that when they go and see their doctor, that those short clinical visits can be as efficient as possible, that they're using the same digital product to be able to make decisions from and be able to have that discussion around the data. So focusing on how the app works at the moment, there's a few key sort of pillars to it. The first one is the ability to have all of your data in one place. So we spent a lot of time building our backend and the integrations engine. So we integrate with, there's around 1,000 different devices at the moment. So from nutrition, glucose, exercise, menstrual cycle tracking, sleep data, bring that all together and add contextualization to it. The second element, which we have in beta, which we're testing internally, is being able to take this information and build training plans off of this or be able to query this. And this is being done through agents. So because we have so much contextualized information from the user, we can have the agent that's able to build plans and also provide context by matching this information to what is known within the scientific literature. So as I explained before, the responses in glucose is changing according to different hormonal responses. If you experience that in real life, it would be useful for you to know why a certain gym session causes a glucose response that is going one way rather than another. Because if you know why, you're going to be able to adapt that. So the education, the contextualization is added. Then the other element will be about more kind of social side of things. So similarly to platforms such as Strava, etc., the ability to share your information, be able to compete in various competitions based on your data. And at the moment, we're also implementing various group features where you can join sports teams, where you can find people that are interested in the same sports as you, either in real life or virtually, to sort of help assist in that as well.
Incredible. Maybe let's talk quickly about your go-to market, and would be interested to learn, how long have you guys been in the market? You just mentioned that you guys are still doing beta test versions. And maybe bring us along or give us a quick overview in terms of go-to market. Do you guys already have, let's say, active users, or are you still sort of testing right now? Maybe also your distribution model, right? Is it a D2C model, or are you guys working with clinics or let's say insurance companies? Maybe give us a quick overview over your, let's say, broad go-to market.
Yeah. So just to give an overview of where we are currently. So we launched the first version at the beginning of this year. We're currently present in over 60 different countries worldwide. And we think this is because a combination of two things: the way in which we built the app to scale on the social level and the early adopters we started getting into the app. And also the fact that so many people are actively searching for something like this because it's such a problem. So in terms of the go-to-market, there's a couple of elements to this. So on the B2C side, we're doing this in a combination of ways through working with influencers, micro-influencers. We're working with professional athletes who are living with diabetes. So we have a couple of high-profile people that we're working with involved on that as well. But we've also taken over the sponsorship of a very large community sports team. It's now called Enhanced Club. So this is a community group of athletes. It's like triathlon, cycling, all sports. We started off across the UK. We just opened up an enhanced club Netherlands, and we've received interest to open chapters in the US, in Australia, in Romania, Switzerland. And from this, we have released clothing, etc. So with this club, we're able to have virtual events. The group is very active socially. So this is another element by which we can match the digital with the real life. And then on the B2B side, we are going directly to clinics to put our dashboard there, starting in endocrinology clinics. The clinical dashboard is without a price point. The reason is because we know that one of the challenges clinics have is paying for all of the number of systems. So we want to provide something that's not only better, but also that doesn't cost anything, so that we can directly put it there. And the idea is that the doctors will act as sort of champions. They will prescribe this in a way, suggest that their patients are using this so that they can better communicate in terms of diabetes management related to sports. And this will also assist in the second phase, whereby we aim to work with people living with type 2 diabetes, because type 2 diabetes will be more around working with the clinics to then reach those individuals, because it's less of a community-driven audience compared to type 1 diabetes.
Very interesting. I think one aspect that seems to be very, let's say, essential to your business is also, let's say, partnerships in general, right? So you're partnering up with, let's say, I assume, or that's the question now, if you're partnering up with, or who are you partnering up with? I assume maybe also with wearables and different firms, maybe also with the CGMs. Could you maybe give us, let's say, a broad overview over your partnership strategy? And also, I think, not sure if how you guys are funded. Is it sort of, do you guys have investors behind you? Maybe give us a brief overview more broadly about the partners you're working with.
Yeah, so in terms of the partnerships, we have some really exciting ones that are already in place and also planned. And the reason this has been possible is because we're doing something that's quite unique, in that we are creating something that is to really help people living with a chronic condition, which is diabetes. But we're aiming to create something which has a much more consumer-facing approach, and is something that isn't necessarily what you have to use to manage your condition, but it's something that you would choose to use, because not only do you benefit from the product itself, but you actively want to use the features. You want to get the benefits from that. So this offers a lot of ways in which is interesting as well for some of the partners. So for example, we have a really good relationship with Dexcom. These are the continuous glucose monitor manufacturers. And this partnership includes both data access and also aspects related to go-to-market. We're currently working together to onboard different clinics in the UK onto the dashboard. And this partnership will become increasingly interesting with the rollout of Stalo. So this is their CGM, which is targeted at people who do not live with diabetes. And we're planning to work together to really augment that solution when it comes to matching the exercise elements with CGM. And then alongside this, there's a couple of others that we're in very good talks with on more the consumer sports side. Again, this is something that a lot of more med tech companies would not be able to touch on, because they're not offering this same thing that we are. And then exactly as you say, like wearable device companies, because we are supporting their go-to-market. We're offering something that doesn't compete with them. We're just offering an additional reason for consumers to switch towards their wearable device. Because by them buying the wearable device, we integrate with the data, we augment the offering again, and we're opening up this different avenue of customers, which is those living with diabetes. So there's quite a few interesting things on that side in terms of like funding and where we are. So to date, we've done this with an extremely lean team. So everything that has been built, this includes both the app and the dashboard, has been done with a team of 2 to 3 people. This includes all of the back-end infrastructure. This includes building this machine, which is now handling the world's largest diabetes and exercise data set, and also the agentic features that I mentioned. And now we're at the process where we are closing a pre-seed round. We're expecting to have this closed over the next couple of days. Like it's really at that point. We, touch wood, have the commitments basically. And with these funds, this will allow us to do something that we have not been in this situation before, where we can really accelerate on the product feature development. We can launch the dashboard much more rapidly in the clinics we're speaking to, and we can to the point where we're able to just build upon the brand that we started putting out there.
Incredible. Great. Sam, we're already slowly coming to an end, but maybe before wrapping it up, I'll be very curious also to learn more about, let's say, how you looking into the future of Enhanced. How does the roadmap look like in the next couple of months, years? Feel free also to share your broad vision where Enhanced should be going to. I mean, we discussed also you guys are only addressing up to this moment type 1 diabetes mostly, but I mean, type 2 diabetes is also, let's say, a huge space you could enter into. Maybe, give us a quick overview of your roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of moonshot vision, and it's something that I don't want to speak too soon or too sort of arrogantly, for example, but I think that glucose monitoring in general is extremely exciting as both a metric in the wellness space and the sports performance space potentially. And I think that it's a technology that no one has yet managed to bring together in terms of how you really make the most of this. And where we would like to build this is that we want to be one of the biggest exercise products in the world, really following the trend of continuous glucose monitor technology to build up something that is providing actionability for those who need it. So starting with type 1 diabetes to really help those who need this support on a 24-hour basis, progressing to type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, as the technology is also becoming available to them. It's a different use case, but helping and supporting people to incorporate exercise and different sort of behavior and decision making into managing glucose in order to have exercise become a key component of your well-being. And then the future is looking as though we're going to see inevitably glucose monitoring tech enter the general space. And this is going to come with huge challenges unless there is someone who knows how to help people make use of that data. And I believe that that's our team. And this is the direction that we want to go into, in that we are going to help people understand how glucose fits into their lifestyle in terms of nutrition and opportunities for managing sports and performance, whether that's preparation for an event, whether that's recovering, whether that's managing different forms of sports nutrition so that you optimize your performance. This is the moonshot that I want to go, whereby everyone thinks glucose and exercise, that is enhanced. Of course, we need to get there first, but this is where I would like this to go.
Wow, exciting. Great. Sam, maybe before concluding this podcast, is there anything else you would like to share that you feel like would be worth sharing, maybe about Enhanced or maybe about the broad topic of diabetes? Anything you feel like is worth sharing?
I think that just if anybody's interested in all of the things, we definitely didn't sort of exhaust anything, so that people should check out our website. They should check out the app as well. We're very keen to be a group who are taking on feedback from people. We're very keen to incorporate the features that people actually want. So if you're interested by this, try out the app. Know that we are racing to improve the features. We are receptive to speaking to people to actually incorporate what is wanted to be there. So check out the website, check out what's going on. I'm also approachable as well, so you can directly get in contact. I think that's everything.
Great. Amazing. Sam, all the best to you and your team. And I'm very curious to follow along how your journey is going to look like. Thanks.
Thanks.